There comes a point in every gardener's journey when the traditional compost pile becomes more of a burden than a benefit. You know the drill, endless turning, layering greens and browns like you're assembling an agricultural lasagna, hoping the pile heats just right, only for it to dry out, go cold, or attract every creature within a 10-mile radius. After years of studying how ancient farmers, frontier settlers, and forgotten civilizations managed organic waste, one truth becomes unavoidable. Most of them never use compost piles the way we do today. Their soil-building systems were simpler, faster, and far more sustainable. When I finally abandoned the modern pile and switched to an old-world pileless method, the results weren't just surprising, they were transformative. My soil changed faster, my workload dropped, and my organic waste disappeared into the ground like it had a purpose again. Before we dive in, this opening minute should make you pause. Think about any ancient settlement ever uncovered by archaeologists. The fertile zones of those sites, the dark, crumbly layers that remain productive even after the civilization has collapsed, were never created with traditional compost heaps. They were built with what we now call integrated decomposition. Organic matter returned directly to the earth where it breaks down naturally within the soil horizons. That method, not our modern backyard bins, is responsible for some of the most enduring topsoil humanity has ever produced. And you know, it's the same approach this pileless method revives for anyone willing to step outside the gardening norms. The reason the pileless system works is because decomposition belongs underground, not above it. Modern composting, you see, forces microbes to work right on the surface, under rather inconsistent heat, fluctuating moisture and, well, constant exposure. It's convenient for us humans, of course, but really it's quite unnatural for the soil ecosystem. When you stop treating organic matter like, something that must cook away in a heap, and instead put it back into the earth just as earlier civilizations did, every piece of waste decomposes with more efficiency. Soil organisms, they operate in these stable temperature bands beneath the surface. Worms, beneficial nematodes, fungi and bacteria, they all function without interruption. You are returning organic matter to its natural environment, and in doing so, you unlock a form of decomposition that is, well, slower, but more complete. It produces humus that stays in the soil far longer than hot compost ever will. This method is shockingly simple because it uses trench cycles instead of piles. A trench system is not a compost bin without walls. It's an in-soil digestion corridor. All you do is dig a narrow trench, usually no wider than a shovel blade, run it through a section of your garden and fill it with daily kitchen scraps, yard waste, leaf litter or plant residues. Once the trench is filled, you bury it and leave it alone. Over the next 6 to 8 weeks, every organism in the soil works through that corridor like a biological assembly line. Worms burrow through the fibres. Fungi take apart the complex carbohydrates. Bacteria break down the soft matter. Nothing needs turning because the soil community does the labour. Ancient Europeans did this in wattle fence gardens. Early settlers across North America used so-called waste channels between crop rows. Even rice-growing cultures in Asia fed their paddy banks with trench layers. You can run the system in cycles that constantly rebuild your soil. The practical application is straightforward, really. You divide your growing space into segments. Then you dig a fresh trench in the first segment and fill it until it reaches ground level. After that, you just move the trench to the next segment. By the time you loop back to the original spot weeks later, the previous trench has collapsed inward and transformed into a dark seam of humus-rich soil. If you plant directly above each decomposed trench, your crops access moisture and nutrients from a channel that functions like a slow-release fertilizer line. Gardeners with clay soil will notice the structure breaking apart, while those with sandy beds will feel the soil becoming more sponge-like. Over the course of a season, the ground becomes, well, an integrated network of decomposition paths that really strengthen the entire bed. The pileless method, works even in very small spaces because it is discreet, odour-free, and, honestly, fast integrating. One of the advantages that early urban households had was, limited outdoor space, so they buried organic waste directly in small pits behind kitchens or along the edges of their property. The same principle absolutely applies today. If you live in an apartment and grow in containers, you can bury small amounts of scraps in the lower third of the pot at the start of the season. If you have a narrow rental garden, you can simply dig shallow, foot-long pockets instead of full trenches. In all cases, the decomposition happens underground, where oxygen flow, moisture and microbial diversity are naturally balanced. A typical compost pile requires months before the material is usable. A buried trench can be ready for planting in far less time because the soil never stops working, day or night, winter or summer. Even during the cold seasons, the earth beneath the surface stays warmer than the air, allowing slow but steady decomposition that doesn't happen in exposed piles. The biggest advantage is that your soil gains long-term structure instead of short-term nutrition. Traditional compost is nutrient-rich but fragile. Once it's mixed into the soil, its benefits fade within a season. The trench method builds stable humus that lasts far longer. This is what archaeologists still find in abandoned fields and settlement gardens centuries after the people are gone. Dark, carbon-rich layers created by burying organic matter exactly where plants grew. When you adopt this technique, you are not feeding your plants. You are rebuilding the architecture of your soil, giving roots an environment that will remain productive year after year. This is what makes the method so appealing to survivalists and historical gardeners alike. It is simple, permanent and resilient. It doesn't rely on tools, store-bought amendments or controlled conditions. It is soil building the way humans practiced it long before modern composting even existed. If you want more forgotten soil-building strategies, field-tested homestead techniques, and historically accurate growing methods that still outperform modern shortcuts, make sure you subscribe to Hydro Haven. Share this video with someone who's ready to break free from compost piles and build their soil the old way.